Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Major development in long-range warfare in Ukraine. Finally, Russia does not go unpunished for conducting war crimes. It is now going to be responded by Ukraine with additional support from, surprisingly, the United States. More than that, we see that in Moldova, Russia has failed miserably and a pro-European party wins the elections. What does this mean for Ukraine? We're going to talk about that as well. But we have a lot of news beyond that, so let's begin because we don't have a lot of time. Hey, Future Georgie here. I'm sorry I will have a little bit of audio issues with the videos. I don't know where they came from. I will have to fix it, but I hope you can still enjoy this video. A nasty surprise. President Zelensky very briefly talked that Russia will not be allowed anymore to conduct the war crimes and strike against the Ukrainian infrastructure. He clearly stated that it is going to be an eye for an eye, and if Russia tries to take out Ukrainian energy infrastructure, Ukraine will respond in kind. Well, and what you know, just a couple of days later, Russia has conducted another massive attack against Ukraine, and we're going to talk about the casualties. Unfortunately, they have been targeting civilian, they have been targeting critical infrastructure, but now we don't have to talk about it with just the negative aspect, because now at least Russia is getting their payback. Because as President Zelensky stated, Ukrainians have responded in kind and caused a major blackout in the Russian city of Belgorod, with some very impressive videos coming from the city. You can watch them if you go to our Discord. We post all of these videos over there, and it was pretty impressive how much Ukraine was achieved and what the effect was, because the videos of Ukrainians striking the energy facility and then just light going out completely in the whole city is truly a sight to be seen. And here I want to be clear with people that want to say is like, oh, but Ukraine is targeting energy infrastructure, they're as bad as Russians. No, because Russia is the aggressor here. They have started this war. They have violated every single convention rule there could have been. They have committed war crimes on level unprecedented. And the only thing they're getting now is just a little bit of a piece of their medicine that they're bringing to Ukrainians every single day. And this is not covering nearly enough of what Ukrainians had to go through. But more importantly, on Belgorod, HIMARS systems were used. It was the Gimler's missiles that flew in and destroyed the targets inside of Russia. And this already raised a couple of eyebrows, because this was a very deliberate strike. But this also came in after a special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, has announced that there will not be any safe zones for Russia anymore, that there is not going to be anything in between Ukrainian decisions to strike targets in Russia and any hand-holding. So finally, we can say that Trump's administration did something more than Biden's administration, is that they allowed Ukraine to finally use the weapons that are supplied in any capacity Ukraine sees fit. And this is great news, because this changes the whole equation completely. Obviously, Ukraine has a lot of their own weapons, but they also have coming from their supporter countries. And the fact that they were not being able to use against the Russians on their own territory was complete nonsense. And finally, this hurdle is over. And now Ukraine is very clearly telling Russia, if you even try doing something to us, you will instantly pay the price. And that price will get higher and higher and higher and higher. But Ukraine is continuing their campaign everywhere else on the front line as well, striking the Russian assets. In Crimea, the S-400 radar station has been taken out. the most crucial part of the whole complex of the S-400. And this is great news indeed. Crimea is a big problem for Russia, as this is where all of their air defense systems come to die. In Chuvashia region, the oil pumping stations have been hit, and they have now been taken offline from the Ukrainian drone strike. The Chuvashia region is located over 1,000 kilometers from Ukrainian border. In Bryansk region, Ukrainian Neptune missiles strike the Elektrodetali plant in Russia. It's a plant that produces electronic components, most likely used for military purposes. Then we need to talk about the biggest problem of EU. This big dolphin over here, Viktor Orban. So if you didn't know, a couple of days ago, Ukrainian intelligence reported that Hungarian intelligence drones flew over some regions in the western part of Ukraine. And at first, Hungarian officials were quick to deny any kind of activities. However, once Viktor Orban hit the stage and hit the public radio or TV interview, I'm not sure which one was it, and he started claiming that Ukraine is not a country, doesn't exist, and generally speaking, that if we support Ukraine, then we're going to bring war to our doorstep. Applying this Georgian dream playbook that they did in Georgia, essentially scaring the population to vote for him, otherwise there will be war. And in between that, he also stated that obviously, yeah, it was our drones, but what's the big deal? Ukraine shouldn't be worrying about this. They should be worrying about Russia. But the problem is that it seems that it's not the first time that's happened. Because after this situation started escalating, Ukrainian drone and radio intelligence expert Sergei Flash, he noted that during summer, there was already an incident with some unknown drones flying supposedly from Hungarian territory. And at first, everyone was just baffled, and there was a lot of deniability, and people just couldn't believe that it would be Hungarians flying over the territory of Ukraine. And specifically, these drones were flying over the city of Mukachevo. And what's interesting is that after this incident with drones from Hungary, shortly after that, a US producer, I believe it was the coffee machines, you might have heard this one, where a US factory in the western part of Ukraine, in the city of Mukachevo, got hit by Russian missiles. So I'm not stating this directly, that Hungary is spying for Russia and delivering intelligence information about the Ukrainian production in the western Ukraine. But the breadcrumb trail is definitely there. And Zelensky has stated as much. He stated that it is going to be a very firm response to Hungary if it will continue escalating and invading sovereign Ukrainian territory. This is a direct challenge to the whole NATO alliance. If we have a rogue state that is indeed conducting operations against Ukraine and is supplying Russia with intelligence, what do we do? So far, there is no answer, but this is an absolute insane potential situation. And we in Europe really need to figure out what to do with this toad, if I can say so, with no disrespect to toads. More than that, Hungary is actively involved in now disinformation campaign targeting Ukraine and essentially smearing the image of Ukraine to Europeans. They are stating that it was Ukrainian false flag operations with drones flying from Belarus and Russian Kaliningrad region, that it was supposedly Ukrainian false flag attacks, and they were flying drones all over Poland, Germany, Denmark, and everything else. Obviously, this is a nonsensical statement, but this is propaganda that Hungary is pushing. And there will be people that believe this. So Hungary is actively participating in aggressive propaganda campaign against Ukraine, our ally, our protector in Europe. And it's important to realize that all of this, like propaganda campaigns, spy campaigns, and everything, it's costing lives of real people that are civilians that never wanted this war. Ukraine wanted just to live in peace. Yet Russia is continuously attacking the country. Unfortunately, in the latest attack, 14 people were injured, one of them in very serious conditions, and 4 people were killed as a result on a massive attack on Kyiv. It is an absolute atrocity that we still do not close the skies over Ukraine after everything that Russia is doing against us in Europe. We need to move fast. And this is something that should have been done day one. But let's move to some of the good news. First, 1,000 Ukrainian Mavic replacement drones will be coming to the front lines. For a very long time, Mavic drones have been absolutely vital for operations of Ukrainians, mostly because of cameras, but there's also other qualities of the drone that were just irreplaceable, and there was nothing that a lot of people really tried to do to substitute this piece of equipment. And China has been moving away from the Mavic 3 drones, and they have been also stingy with supplying equipment to Ukraine a little bit. But now Ukrainians are claiming they have a pretty nice working analog of the Mavic 3 drone that will be coming en masse to Ukrainian soldiers on the front line. Then I want to fight a piece of information that was presented to me in the comment section on my last video. Someone says that there are other channels that are referring to the Kiel Institute report and stating that Russia is producing over 440 tanks during 1/4 of this year. So essentially that Russian tank production is absolutely massive. And this is the actual report. It's a very, very good paper. It goes into a lot of really good stuff. But my problem is, once I read it, this is the direct representation of everything that I have with paper analysis, when person does not really go in depth to understand the situation on the ground, but rather operates specifically on just the data that he has access to. Because this is the most direct one there is. So where did this number of 400 plus tanks is coming from? And this comes from the page 16, 17 of this report, where there is a methodology for estimating Russian production. And in a nutshell, you can obviously find this report online, but in a nutshell, the author of this report assumed the total number of Russian troops that are on the front lines. He took the paper number of how many tanks, vehicles, equipment there should be for this Russian troops, the whole full force, and then he took the standard attrition numbers for warfare that have been used previously to calculate the attrition rates. And he, after all of that, he estimated what would be the production rate of Russia to supply these units with the necessary amount of vehicles for them to be effective. And it completely ignores the reality on the ground. The fact that vehicles are targeted beyond any kind of calculations of warfare that we had before. Modern type of warfare is specifically brutal for vehicles. That a lot of these Russian units are nowhere near 100% full size on the front lines. A lot of them are operating on staffing levels of some even lower, and majority of these forces are using just motorcycles and smaller vehicles, and they're not using vehicles like tanks at all. So the fact that someone is operating on the front line doesn't mean that if they nominally have the tanks in their listings, that doesn't mean that they're using tanks or they even have them in a working condition. So there's just way too much problems with this number. So I will advise everyone, if you hear that Russia is producing over 400 tanks in 1/4 of the year, it's I don't want to say made up number, but it's pretty much a made up number. And another piece of information that really spread like wildfire is that Ukraine is to get a Gripen aircraft, which is a bit of a stretch. So I'm not saying that it's not the case, but it is coming from specifically this interview with General Havriluk. And what he actually states is, to a question from the BBC, and when you say expected, do you mean all of these aircraft, both the Mirage and the Gripen, or just one of them, the F-16? Question mark. And General Gavriluk responds, practically you named the nomenclature correctly, but I won't go into details about when, what, which one. So, and from that, media basically has extracted Gripens will be supplied to Ukraine, confirmed. I want to just advise, I don't want to say that Ukraine will not get Gripen. I'm just saying that this is specifically the case of media really stretching the narrative. Support for EU plan to stop the gas flow to Hungary and Slovakia is now supported by Hungary, which has the pipe going through their country from Turkey. And now Bulgaria is claiming that they will be shutting down the transit of this gas from 2027. It's a bit late, but I guess this is the case when it's better late than never. Russian military is suffering major losses due to desertions lately. They are estimating that roughly 10% of the entire force deployed in Ukraine has been deserting in 2020. And this is pretty big numbers. However, it is still not significant enough to fully claim that desertion rate is above average. I've seen more detailed analysis when the desertion rates were compared between different types of wars that Russia had and what were the outcomes of those wars. And Russian desertion rate is pretty high. 10% is quite a lot, but it is still not at any kind of critical level where this is going to be an actual fundamental problem for the Russian forces. They're still using a lot of the fear tactics to keep people in line in the Russian army. Hopefully, with dwindling economic situation and devaluation of any kind of salary and money that Russian mercenaries can get in their military, we will see this desertion rate increase. A huge blow to Russian interest was delivered in Moldova, where the population of the country has delivered very rough statement to Russia. We don't want you, we want Europe. 50.03% of votes have been cast in favor of the PAS party in Moldova. This is a pro-European party, and there was other parties that were taking a lot more pro-Russian stances, or at least neutral pro-Russian positions. However, all of them were defeated, and now the PAS has they're able to push the policy, and Moldova gets incredible chance at becoming an EU member in a very short term. I'm really hoping that they will not miss it. And most importantly, this also means that Ukraine is also interlinked with Moldova. So now there is a complete go-ahead with the European Union to start talking about accession and opening the clusters of negotiations to align the country's political systems and economic systems and tax systems. So Europe is ready to accept Moldova and Ukraine into their midst, despite the fact that this is happening in opposition to what Hungary wants. To be honest, I think we could exchange Hungary under Orban for these two countries at any day of the week. If you made it this far, please click the subscribe button. It really helps elevate the video upwards in the algorithm so more people can see it. I love you. Slava Ukraini, trust in Ukrainian armed forces, and I will see you next time.
I see